Welcome back to Beyond Well. I'm Sheila Hamilton, and I'm so happy to be joined today with Mitchell Jackson. God, Mitchell, it's so good to see you again.
Yeah, back in action.
Honestly, when you said you were coming back to town, I was like, of all of the guests we had, I had one wish to have an ongoing conversation with Mitchell Jackson.
Oh, wow.
Because I feel like with every time we get more comfortable talking about race, we have more things that are happening out in the world to speak about.
Yeah.
And also today, I really wanted to talk with you about the passing of Kobe.
Yeah.
And most of my friends who live in LA say, you don't understand. It's like the world has stopped.
Yeah.
What was it like for you hearing that Kobe had passed?
I remember I was in the gym and I was texting with my friend about a book event. And then in the middle of it, he was like, yeah, man, Kobe. And I was like, Kobe? Like, I'm thinking, oh, maybe Kobe bought the Lakers or something, you know?
Yeah.
And then I just Googled it and I was like, that can't be true.
Yeah.
And by the time I'd gotten home, I had several texts from people and, started reading the reports. And then I started thinking, oh, man, like the first thought in my head was, wow, what about his kids? Like, they're going to be so sad. And then, the rumor was going around that more than his daughter was in the plane or in the helicopter. It was devastating. And then, you don't really realize the impact until all these kind of stories start coming out about how Kobe would pull me to the side or how he called me, when I was hurting, or like Draymond Green saying he tried to pick me up. And then I read recently, my friend, this writer named Jason Reynolds, wrote a story for The Undefeated about a time that he's a young adult writer, and Kobe called him because his daughter liked his books. And he wanted to talk to him about writing. And then he said that he was going to start a publishing company and he wanted him to come over. And I was like, wow, man, like he was really a Renaissance man.
Yeah.
And I don't know of another. I mean, I'm sure there are other people like that in the NBA, but like I can't think of another player who has that kind of breadth of like cultural awareness.
Yeah, it's so remarkable how he maintained his relevance, how he reinvented himself, how he became in some ways more respected because, the difficulty.
Yeah.
And it was almost like he was the phoenix rising from the ashes.
Yeah.
And I think, wow, that's hard to do because you have to have all three things: a great career, then great opportunity, and the willingness to be open to really like broaden oneself,
Yeah.
And that's really hard to do.
Yeah.
It's also fascinating to me because of this organization that he set forth, the MAMA, the schools, and the way that he encouraged young, especially Black men, to take ownership of their lives. The question is, who's going to carry that work forward?
Right.
Right.
Yeah. I mean, one would hope there are a lot of, I was just with a couple of NBA guys last night, and I think that that's on their mind. I think it's one thing for it to be on your mind. It's another thing to like implement the plan and actually put the resources behind. I think LeBron is doing that same work, right? Like he just announced last week that everyone in his Promise Academy is getting a full scholarship to Kent State University, I think it is. He's doing that. I mean, he has a school. No one really talks about Jalen Rose. Jalen Rose had a school before LeBron did. So there are guys that are doing this work. Obviously LeBron is on the same level of Kobe. Kobe was really a Renaissance man. The dude got an Oscar.
Right? Yeah. I know.
The first thing you touch gets an Oscar.
He didn't seem to me like a basketball player who did all these things.
Right.
He was this man who also played basketball.
Yeah, right.
And that's a rare thing at that talent.
Right.
level.
You think about Michael Jordan, like Jordan played ball and then his legacy made him a billionaire, right? I don't know what else, he gambles, he smokes cigars, and this is not to disparage Jordan, but like, I don't know if Jordan is like doing all of those things. Though I was very happy to see Jordan open the clinic. Did you all see that?
That's fantastic.
I think it's in Charlotte it's like a clinic where I think low income people don't have to pay for medical care or something.
Oh, wow. Okay.
So Mike he's doing his thing too, but I just think it's just, when I think of Kobe, like I think of Kobe in his Tom Ford suits, when everybody else is like, I don't know what they're wearing, but
Right.
he got the Tom Ford suit and
Yeah.
shoe, like with the good knot. Like this
Yeah.
guy he has really good taste.
Yeah, that's exactly right. It's also interesting to me, given especially your first book, Residue Years, how much interplay there was for you with athletes, NBA athletes being the one example, drug runners being the other example.
Yeah.
And I want you to take me into the mind of a young African-American youth growing up with poverty and seeing these two kind of extremes.
Yeah. So I came upon, I'm trying to look it up so I don't mess it up, this book. I was at Oberlin College. There's an ex-Oberlin College president named Robert Fuller.
Okay.
Robert Fuller wrote a book called Somebodies and Nobodies, where he has this. He basically boils down all inequality to this idea of a group of people or an individual wanting to be a somebody versus not wanting to be a nobody.
Oh, wow. Wow. Oh, man.
Yeah. He calls it rankism, and he says it's at the heart of
so
all
powerful.
inequalities.
Oh, wow.
So I think if you take that and you apply it to, drug dealers and basketball players, well, that's really just trying to figure out how you become a somebody with the resources and the kind of information that you already have present, right? Like,
Wow.
You can apply that to, anything, like politics, you want to be the somebody. And so I think that, to me, is at the heart of that. It seems, disparate on the kind of surface, but really it's just, well, I want to matter to someone or some group of people.
Yeah.
And so for you personally, was there a moment in your, like you spent a lot of time on the courts, you did a lot of work to trying to become a better basketball player.
Yeah.
Was there a moment where you saw the dream of that beginning to fade and the other one kind of rising?
Absolutely.
Wow.
2 moments. One, when I graduated from high school, I thought I had like some light interest from Division I schools, like, I don't know, Boise State or something. And I can't remember the other schools, but I didn't get a D1 scholarship. So right then I knew that, it was going to be harder for me to achieve the dream that I wanted. So I ended up playing junior college ball, and then I was all league in my last year of junior college ball, but I also didn't have a lot of offers coming at that point. But then my coach, he was like, yeah, I think you should look into this academic scholarship. So there was another moment where it was like, well, you finished 2 years of junior college ball, like you could go to a kind of weak Division I school, you can go to maybe a okay D2 school, but like, you're probably not going to the league. And at this time, I'm starting to make money selling drugs. So it's like, I just stay here and go to school and do these things.
What's interesting for me is like if someone like Mitchell at that age had a lot of mentors who he saw who were in business, people in town who had great jobs, who were bankers, who were realtors, who worked at Nike. If you had all of those mentors going, hey, not everybody plays ball. There's a ton of other great jobs.
Yeah.
It just really speaks to me like how pivotal it is that you see examples of what's possible.
Yeah, I saw you got the program for the young ladies doing just that. Yeah, but I think it's different because we do see people with jobs, but again, you have to have a job that makes you a somebody. Like you can't just be the school janitor. Like we see that. You want to be a person who makes decisions, who can affect lives, who people respect in the community. And for that, like you have to have a certain kind of cachet. So the jobs that we see working guys, we see the UPS guy, we see the mailman, we see the high school counselor, and that I think, while that obviously we need those people and that's valuable, it doesn't necessarily, those aren't the jobs that are going to elevate you out of systemic poverty.
It's fascinating to me that even now with the 20-year war on drugs and seeing so many people who ended up going to prison and their lives ruined for it, that there is still cachet in a drug running trade because it still gives you the gold necklaces and the cars and the hose.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? I mean, really, that's what's so devastating about it is there's no way to take that down because pop culture has only elevated it.
Right. Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. Is it I'm curious, is it the rewards, the financial rewards, or is it the standing in some reference group, or both?
I think it's both. I think what you really want to be able to do is have someone appreciate you and respect you. And we have, capitalism has created this culture where you got to have money in order to do that, right? In order for that to happen for you. So you realize you need a certain amount of money to get really this respect. And then also you want to be able to take care of your friends, your family, or your family first, your friends. And so I think there's the motivation. But, I was just thinking the hearing when they disallowed the witnesses, and then later even the orange guy saying, I'm going to, commute these sentences or,
Yeah.
Yeah.
if I were selling drugs right now, the idea of justice in America, like you already knew it, but you couldn't like just point to an explicit example of like, there's no justice, right?
Right.
But right now, there's such an explicit example that there is no such thing as justice in America, right? Like if you are a white man, you can basically do whatever you want. And I know that's at the highest level, but to me, that's symbolic in a way. So if I'm a dude on the curb or I got a hustle going, why would I care what you say is justice? Because we know now that it's malleable.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's such an amazing point. What Kobe's organization was trying to say is, despite all the external forces, because there's always going to be unfairness, where justice is in your heart. It's in the way that you approach the world. And I think it's a really difficult conversation to have when there's not external examples of that working.
Right.
I think
exactly.
it does feel like a big lie. I think it does. It's a really tricky time right now to tell kids that keep being honest, keep being kind, keep being compassionate when, well, wait a minute, the examples that we're seeing in the world are doing just the opposite. And man, they're making a lot of money.
Right.
And they're really
they got
famous.
all the power, right?
That's right.
That's
How do you think that the conversation about race has changed since we talked with you last? Because I follow every time you do an interview. And the ones that I love the most is when you're talking with 3 other black dudes. I love it because you get so real about the obstacles in front of black Americans.
Yeah. Again, I just think since we last talked, was that probably March of 2019, it's so in your face now. Like the level of racial animus at the highest level of power, not just in the government, but in business. I mean, we got Bloomberg, like he's trying to patch it up, but like it's too much evidence that you hold these beliefs, so.
Well, he didn't like how it turned out.
Right.
I believe is how he phrased it.
Yeah. It's like, come on, man. So I think now I was talking to Cool Nuts on the show. We were talking about how if you are paying attention, even like infinitesimally to what's happening, and you're black, you are angry all of the time. Like you can't be aware and not be mad about today's injustice, tomorrow's injustice. So you also have to kind of figure out how to create a space for yourself where you can exist and still kind of move through the world without feeling like on the defensive or even on the offense against these injustices. So like think about the guy that the notion that black men are angry. Right? Like where does that come from? Like that came from post-Reconstruction era, when they were taking away the jobs and they're like, oh, we supposed to be free. And they're like, nah, if we catch you loitering over here, like you going back on the chain gang, like, yeah, of course you're going to be angry. Like you can't protect your woman. If they say you touched a white woman, you going to jail or being lynched. So the anger was created and they were aware of the circumstances. So now it's like, well, how different is it now? Like, where does this anger come from? So you get penalized for it. And it's actually unhealthy. It hurts you.
Yeah.
And you can't really move through the world like that. But then on the other hand, it's like, well, damn, they keep giving us stuff to overcome. Like every day, if you just wake up and look at just the headlines, you would be mad.
I carry that same anger every day around what's happening in our country and feeling more and more alienated from both extremes, to tell you the truth. But I think the historical things that have happened, if you're black, compound it so enormously. How do you go forward? How do you continue to be optimistic, to organize, to keep moving through this world that's so devastating right now and still come out with some sense of I'm going to stay here and make things better?
Yeah. I mean, I think you have to do it with community, with solidarity with other people who recognize this, who also have enough of a historical vantage to know that while it's new, but it's also not dissimilar from, I mean, if you think about it, this is like we're in post-Reconstruction again, right? The same kind of tactics that they were using, like a reassertion of whiteness, happened after they manumitted the slaves and say like, okay, now you guys remember it was like, a lot of blacks got in government. They were like, oh no, we can't have this. We're gonna start gerrymandering this stuff. So like now what are they doing? They got $1 billion campaign, gerrymander as many elections as they can. So it's like we've been here before. It looks a little different. And I think you need an elder or someone who's wise enough to say, hey man, look, this happened before. Here's what they did in this case. And then here's how we might need to, revise that for this current kind of iteration of it. But I think if you don't know the history, you just walking around here like,
so true.
You want to do something to somebody.
It's like every American, huh?
And something really fundamental like gerrymandering isn't getting talked about very much.
Right.
And my feeling, and I'm curious to know how you feel about this, we're coming up on where some of the candidates are saying, well, there's going to be a larger percentage of black vote. And sometimes the conversations feel really genuine and they feel meaningful. And a lot of times the courting of the black vote feels like a toxic or cold couple. And February 14th rolls around and he buys flowers and we go out to dinner. But like,
Great
just
analogy.
wait till the 15th.
Yeah, exactly.
Because back in the closet you go.
That is such a great
They like
analogy.
giving out. What was that? The dude was like giving out money to some black clergymen. Like, come on, man.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And it's like, how fundamental is this concern or even awareness?
Right.
Because it seems like if it were there, we would be talking more about things like gerrymandering.
Yeah.
As opposed to just,
Make sure to get out and vote.
Right.
Yeah, we're going to sort of pull out this topic and prance it around to garner some support from the African American community.
Yeah.
Man.
And then it's like, just wait until, I'm in office.
November 7th.
And then I will. That's right.
You're like, what?
And then maybe or maybe not, I'll be returning your calls. That's what it feels like. Is that kind of like it's like more insulting that it even gets talked about at times?
Man, it's so disheartening, right? Like when people were like at the impeachment trial, they were like, well, we just got to make sure, like, they're going to vote him out. They're not going to vote for the witnesses. They're going to, acquit him. But, you just got to get out and vote. I'm like, you don't think that the Republicans had a plan for after they acquitted him? Like, of course they had a plan so that the people that got out and vote wouldn't matter. Like,
that's right.
Right? This is like the long game. This ain't the short game.
Yeah. I totally
which is not
agree.
to say don't go vote, but I think that that's a little naive to think that if we just go out and vote, it's just going to, they already announced in this district and that district won't count.
Yeah.
That functionally everybody's vote counts the same.
Yeah, exactly.
So, you know what I keep thinking about? I'm so always anticipating what your next project and your next book is. And I think there's a place for a person like you who's risen out of so much poverty and to be an intellectual figurehead about how do we keep faith? How do we stay positive? How do we keep working toward Mamba?
Mamba mentality.
Yeah, exactly.
When I hear the word intellectual, it makes me almost cringe because it feels like a category or an identity that's already prefabricated. Like I have to be something other than I am. Like I want to be astute. I want to be informed. I want to be creative. But when I hear that word, I think of, obviously James Baldwin, W.E.B. Du Bois, and that's just like such a huge, like right now, if you call public intellectuals, you mean Ta-Nehisi Coates, right? Like he's our public intellectual.
Yeah.
But actually, Imani Perry is a woman I just had a conversation with a week ago or so in New York, and she might be our greatest thinker, but people don't really mention her. But that's just, I know that I don't have the breadth of understanding of reading to like speak to it in the way that they do with enough force. So, I do want to do my part, and I think there's a place for a guy who comes, like they have a different kind of pedigree. They were both children of civil rights activists and black nationalists, and, they came through this system of preparation. I didn't come from any of that, right? Like by the time I started reading, I'm in my mid-20s. By the time they're in their mid-20s, they're like tenured professors at Princeton.
They were writing the stuff that you were reading.
Exactly.
I don't know. I always hear the people that I think are most likely to be the next great leaders declining my encouragement to be the next great leaders.
I do want to be a leader. I just think I want to be able to do things that feel genuine.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. Well, that's the kind of leaders I think we need.
Yeah.
I am so sad I don't get to talk to you longer. And I know Brian feels the same way.
Absolutely.
Every time you stop by, it's just
Yeah,
so
it's great.
wonderful.
I thank y'all for letting me come through.
You've got to come back.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
These conversations
Thank
are
you,
brought to us by the Foundation for Excellence in Mental Health Care and Cedar Hills Hospital. We sure appreciate any kind of thumbs up you can give us where you listen to podcasts.